It was a stormy night when Lily stayed up late reading in bed. Suddenly, she heard soft tapping on her window. She thought it was just the wind, so she ignored it. But then it came again, louder and more persistent tap, tap, tap. Curious and slightly frightened, she peeked through the curtains. Nothing but the pouring rain and darkness outside. Relieved, she went back to her book. Then, her cell phone vibrated. There was a message from a number she didn't recognize. "I see you." Lily turned and looked out the window once more. This time, she saw a shadow just beyond the window pane tapping against the glass. Late one stormy night, Sarah was all alone in her house while the wind howled outside her window. She heard the soft knock on the door. Confused, Sarah looked through the peephole but saw nothing. She went back to sit down again. A couple of minutes later, again the knock came, loud this time. Reluctantly, she opened the door, and no one was there. But when she turned around to step back inside, a voice whispered from behind her, "I'm right here." She turned around. Nobody. Freezing with fear, she noticed a shadow moving slowly across the wall, creeping closer. It was a reflection of a person who was standing behind her. But when she turned to see, nobody there. Then she felt a cold hand on her shoulder. Late one night, Jake was lying in bed when he heard a faint knocking sound coming from the attic. It was strange. He lived alone, and he was sure he'd locked the attic door hours ago. His heart was racing as the knocking grew louder, more urgent. Unable to ignore it, he grabbed a flashlight and cautiously went upstairs. The attic door was slightly ajar. As he pushed it open, the flashlight flickered, revealing nothing but old boxes. Just as he turned to leave, his phone buzzed with a text. "I'm right behind you." He spun around, but the attic was empty. Then he heard the knocking again, this time from inside the closet behind him. It was a quiet evening when Mark sat down to play video games in his living room. The house was empty, or so he thought. As he reached for his drink, he heard a faint whisper, so soft it was almost a breath. "Mark." Thinking it was his imagination, he shrugged it off. But then, the whisper came again, louder this time. "Mark, I'm behind you." His heart raced. He spun around, but the room was empty. Shaking his head, he returned to his game. The whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more desperate. "Mark, I'm right here." Suddenly, the lights flickered. His reflection in the TV screen wasn't his own. It smiled. He didn't. It was a quiet, rainy night when Lisa was home alone, curled up on the couch watching TV. Suddenly, she heard a soft scratching noise coming from the back door. She thought at first it was the wind. However, the sound was growing louder and more insistent. Curious, she got up and went cautiously towards the door. Through the frosted glass, she saw nothing, just darkness. Relieved, she turned to walk back to the living room. That's when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I see you." Confused, she glanced around the room. The door was still locked. Then she heard it again, the scratching noise, now coming from the window next to her. She froze. The door creaked open behind her. At midnight, Jenna was alone in her apartment scrolling through social media. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I see you." Her heart was racing as she glanced around the room. No one. She shrugged it off, thinking it was a prank. Then another message came. "Look out the window." Reluctantly, she stood and peeked outside, but all she saw was the empty street. Disappointed, she turned away, then froze. A figure was standing in her reflection, right behind her, staring at her with wide eyes. Jenna whipped around, but no one was there. The phone buzzed again. "You should have looked closer." Late one night, Tom sat alone in his living room, scrolling through his phone. The house was silent, except for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Suddenly, he heard a faint whisper from the corner of the room. "Tom." He froze, his heart pounding. He looked around, no one was there. He thought it was his imagination and went back to his phone. Then came the whisper again, but this time louder. "Tom, don't turn around." He felt chilled to the bone, ignoring it and trying to be calm. But something in him compelled him to slowly turn his head. In the reflection of the window, he saw a figure standing just behind him, smiling. And it wasn't his own reflection. Sophie was alone in her apartment, watching TV late at night. The lights flickered once, then went out. Annoyed, She grabbed her phone and walked into the kitchen to find a flashlight. As she fumbled through the drawer, she heard a faint sound behind her like footsteps. Turning around, the room was empty. But when she checked her phone, there was a new message. Asterisk, I'm in your living room. Asterisk. Her heart skipped a beat. She crept back into the dark living room, searching the shadows. Nothing. Just as she turned to leave, she saw her reflection in the dark window. It wasn't her. It was standing behind her. Lena woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of soft tapping on her bedroom window. She sat up, confused. There was no one outside. Trying to shake it off, she turned to go back to sleep. But then the tapping came again, louder this time. Nervously, she stands up and goes to the window. She looks into the dark yard, not seeing anything. Just in time to close the blinds, she feels a chill down her back. A figure appears behind her through the reflection. Its face is pale and staring eyes are wide and hollow. Frozen. She hears in her ear, "I've been watching you sleep."